My name's Shephard, and apart from this talk having a fantastic clickbait title, it's going to go holistically over some of the stuff that you should probably avoid and try doing when starting up a small studio, or if you're a one-man band trying to do as one person. Bit about myself. I've, over the last decade and change, been a part of quite a few companies. I've run a number of them. And 2.5 of them have been game studios. And I say half because my first company I ran was 3D visualization and we used game technology, so I count that as a half. My latest company that I'm involved with games is Cloudfire Studios, and I'm the creative director of the Cloudfire Studios. I've got my technical director sitting down here judging me the whole way through this talk. We're working on a game called Rampage Arena, which is PvP, online PvP, balls smashing into other balls, deathmatch style, which has a release date of somewhere in the next millennia. I personally have been involved in, I've been bought out as part of companies. I've bought people out, I've shut down companies, I've started new ones, and I've even been invited to join the boards of others. So over all of that experience over the last 10 years, I figured I'd share some of the good and some of the bad. The first section I'll cover is pre-planning your company. And when I say pre-planning the company, I don't mean making it a kick-ass logo and making sure your .com's available. I'm talking about like the structure. I'm talking about who makes up your team in your company and what jobs you give them to do. How you make your decisions as an organization. So if when there's just one of you, it's pretty easy because you only have to convince yourself of things. But when you've got a team of more than one person, there's always weird dynamics that start happening that you have to make sure that you're okay with. I also talk about responsibilities. Who is taking care of the business side of things? When I first started out with my first company, I started with one other person, and that guy said, "Oh, I'll take care of all the business side of things." This is lesson number 1. Make sure that the person that says he's going to take care of the business side of things is actually good at business, because it turns out that he did absolutely nothing. And at the end of the 12 months when we inevitably had to wrap up this company, he didn't keep any financial records. And the IRD came knocking, and that wasn't pleasant. So make sure that the people that you're entrusting into your company are saying, "I can do this," can actually do that. And also make sure you've got someone who's good at making coffee. For a lot of you out here, or some of you out here, you'll be students getting through your various degrees and that sort of thing. Some of you will be maybe shifting from jobs, wanting to get into making games, starting your first studio. And a couple of you will be lucky enough to have a first contract to kickstart you into doing that. Some people may be trying to find that contract in order to boost them into business. My first company that I ran, this exact situation happened. I came straight out of Polytech, and this is over 10 years ago now. And I created as my submission piece a pre-colonial simulation, a real-time simulation. And the right people saw it, and I got offered a contract to expand on it for a place called Science Alive in Christchurch. I used this to kickstart myself into my first company with this other friend of mine. The mistake that I made with that one is that we thought, fantastic, first contract, let's get straight into it. We didn't bother planning anything out. We were just jumping straight into the work because we wanted to impress people, as you do when you're first in business, and you get straight into it. So the biggest takeaway from that is, time. Just give yourself a bit of time when you're taking on that first contract, and make sure that you're prepared to jump in. You're prepared, and you're not going to jump straight into working on it. So make sure that the key team members you've got set up know what they're doing. You know what they're going to be doing throughout the process and that sort of thing. So that's covering the allow yourself some time to prepare. Yeah, make sure, again, comes back to make sure someone is knowledgeable in business. And I can't stress this enough. You know, the person that I jumped on board with was all talk. And you come across people like this a lot of the time where they'll talk the talk, but they just won't walk the walk. You gotta make sure that they're gonna do what they say they're gonna do. For people that are one-man bands or people that have a team that they've got in mind and they're all artists or they're a couple of programmers and an artist and they have no idea about business, there's all sorts of courses that you can go and do for free that were at part-time as well, so they won't, and night courses, and they won't get in the way of your day jobs. I personally went through and did the first one, and I'm going to try and pronounce this, and you're going to have to forgive me if I screw it up. It's Te Wananga Aotearoa is a Maori-based organisation that offers courses for everybody, not just for Maori. So they're a fantastic resource, and at the end of their night business course, you end up with a 60-page business plan, which definitely was an advantage. They are throughout the country, so it's not just limited because I'm from Christchurch. They're right the way throughout all of the country. Open Polytech do similar sorts of things as well. Right, coming back, I'm going to reiterate on this. Allow for GST and tax. Okay, so when the person says, I'm going to take care of business, that person is going to be doing stuff like finances and all that sort of thing. You've got to make sure that they do know what they're doing, because there's all sorts of things you can do for GST and tax write-offs, especially when you start out, that will hugely benefit you. Like if your business registers for GST, you can do stuff like claim back for all of your GST on all of your expenses that you're buying. So you're buying computer equipment, you can instantly claim 15% back. And stuff like, make sure that they know what they're doing as far as how they're claiming for items when they file for tax and that sort of thing. An accountant is a great resource when it comes to that, and they're worth their weight in gold. Yeah, so the other side of this is trying to think about what your next step is while you're doing your current gig. So coming back to the first project that I took on, this was a mistake I made, and it cost us a lot. In fact, it cost us the business in the end. We had this contract that lasted us 6 months, I think it was. And we worked on it, and we were working our asses off, and we got to the end of it, and we submitted it. They were happy with it, but we didn't take any time to try and find any additional work or plan whatever was happening next. And so we got to the end of it. We had the last part of the payout, and we had enough money to live on for 2 months, which was not ideal. So with my businesses after that, the takeaway from that is to make sure that you're thinking about whatever you're going to do next halfway through whatever you're doing. Right, so now you've got your company all set up, and it's time to deal with the team selection. Team selection for people that don't know a lot of people in the gaming industry is tricky. There are several ways of finding people. Some of you will already have team members. You're like, I'm definitely working with this guy because he's awesome. For those people that are one-man bands who are looking at this and going, oh, I really want to share this experience with someone because it's scary, that's fine. You can find people anywhere. Like you're at the right place. This is a great opportunity to go and mix with people and rub shoulders with other people that are in the industry. And there are a lot of people that are actually one-man bands around you now that would be more than happy to team up. There's also posting on the NZGDA job list. There are lots of people that go through and look at that on a weekly basis. You've got local meetups that happen in every single city. So you can go along to those developer meetups, meet other people that are developing games, and chuck ideas around and meet someone that maybe will want to join you on your team. There's also social network groups. They're huge. I'm part of, because I'm an Unreal guy, part of the Unreal group on Facebook. There's also an indie development group as well. And literally searches of that in Facebook will bring you up with those groups. Definitely join them because there's lots of people all doing the exact same thing out there. You've also got, for people that are into Unreal, you've got the Unreal Slackers who are on Discord, which is like Skype but like a million times better. Yeah, so yeah, definitely join that, because there's literally thousands of people online at any one time, and they're all happy to chat. Yeah, so coming back to reiterating over like that first point that I keep making, is make sure your team member, you know your team member's strengths and weaknesses. And a way of doing that, if you're just selecting your team members, and even if you've got friends that you're starting with, or people you've met through your courses or whatever, this is still important. Before you start, set out tests to cover what you need. So give them a test. If they're a 3D modeler, give them a test to make sure they're going to be able to do what you want them to be able to do when you're making your game. Because the worst thing is you're sitting with someone that you think is fantastic, and when you come to actually make the game, the quality is less than desirable. Give them a hard deadline and make sure that it's met. That's you could have the best artist in the world, but if you give them a 3-day deadline and they hand you something in 6 days, that's useless. So you've got to make sure that they are able to stick to the deadlines that you set them. Make sure that they understand and can communicate. And that is really important, because if you give them a job and they don't understand for whatever reason, or they can't communicate back an idea or reason why something isn't going to work, you need to make sure that the communication runs both ways. Otherwise, it's just going to be the relationship there is just not going to work. And again, confirm their quality of work. All right. So then you've got to decide, once you've got your team members, how they're going to make up your company. And I hear the biggest misnomer out there is that people think that when they start a company with friends or whatever, they're like, oh, well, I'm starting with 4 people. I need to make sure that those 4 people are all shareholders and equal shareholders to make sure that they all get the equal profits. Massive misnomer. Shareholders are just used to calculate dividends at the end of the year on profits. And you shouldn't be running your company at a profit for at least 2 years when you start out. So, and that doesn't mean that you're not making money. It just means that you need to be on paper making no money. You can do what's called profit shares, which are all you can build into your contracts with people. And profit shares just means that you're signing an agreement with those team members saying, hey, when this game gets released, or when we market, X percentage will go to you. You don't need them to be shareholders in order to do that. That's an important one. Contracts for everyone. So anyone that you're starting a business with, you need to have a contract with. And I know you might think, oh, I've known these guys for 10 years. I'm good. I don't need a contract. Rubbish. The first guy that I started with was I'd known for eight years previous. And the moment things got messy, he lawyered up and absolutely took me to the cleaners. And we had no contracts between us. And so we had nothing like exit strategies or anything like that. So your contracts that you give your team members need to involve how things are going to be exited on both of your parts. So if the company closes down, what happens? And if they leave or they want to leave, what happens and how can they do it? Or if you need to get rid of them, what's the process and what do they need to do in order to justify kicking them out of the team? Before I jump through, if you're panicking about, oh my God, lawyers cost loads of money, they do, but there are loads of free resources out on Google and that sort of thing which you can search for just getting a generic employment contract, working through it, making sure that you've got the clauses that you want in there, and that's free. There are a couple of lawyers here in Auckland that are fairly cheap if you want to just get them adjusting contracts. Right, so you've sorted out your team. Now you're on to pre-planning your game. And I reiterate, this is going to be quite holistic. And this is what we do in Cloudfire more than what you should do. So when you're dealing with this sort of stuff, there's several ways to skin a cat, and this is the way we do it. Okay, so one way we've learned the hard way is we've taken ideas previously in the past and just gone, right, let's make a game out of it, and not really thought about the end result of the idea and how that will play out. So I think probably creating concepts before jumping in. And when you do that, find the fun in those concepts early. Make sure that each one of the concepts that you're creating, you instantly know, hey, this is really entertaining, or oh, this is a load of rubbish. And the moment you get to that point, you can chuck it out and move on to the next concept. It's a really nice way of eliminating the bad ideas. You control or limit the size of these, obviously, so you don't set your concepts as, oh yeah, let's build World of Warcraft as one of these concepts. Keep them contained, unless you've got a team of 100, and limit the time spent on the concept. So give it 5 days, 3 days, whatever per concept, and do it really intense. And you don't worry about final graphics or anything like that. Just get the thing conceptually working and the gameplay working. So once you've got your concepts that you're happy with, you pick one of them that really works, that you're all deciding that you want to move forward with, and you create a game plan. The one area that we've found is more important than we realized was the target audience. And I'll give you an example. The latest game that we're working on, Rampage Arena, we came up with a concept and we wanted to have rolling balls flying around in an arena with squishing people and blood and gore going everywhere. And that was kind of our goal. And then we went, well, if there's going to be blood and gore, it will be 16 to 24-year-old males that are going to enjoy this one. And we created the concept, took it to Armageddon, but we didn't have enough time to put in the blood and gore and the people running around. So it was just deathmatch with balls. And we found that what came out of that was our target audience was 8 to 16-year-olds across the board. So it's really important to consider your target audience before you start putting in all your ideas, rather than coming up with it as an afterthought later, because you can then specifically target the age groups rather than just thinking, it's this, that'll do. That'll be our target audience. And that's quite important, because they're the people that buy the game. Okay, so once you've worked out your target audience, we normally write a brief main gameplay section that will allow whoever it is to jump straight into the document and within a few minutes know what the game is going to be about. So keeping it brief, I think the biggest one we have is sort of 2 paragraphs, so we want to keep it really, really brief. Then you want to set out your virgin feature sets. Now, the way we do this is we have 4 sections. We have the concept, alpha, beta, and release. And the way you take features that you think are going to be, that you don't have to have in the initial concept, aren't core gameplay, and you shift them out into like the alpha and beta sections, just so that you can, the main concept, and when I say concept, I mean the next iteration on from the initial one that you would have done originally. That way you're kind of, each time you've got a plan of what you're moving on to next, rather than trying to fit in all these ideas into the final release of a game, and you just get bogged down in the amount of features that you've got. The other thing you need to consider is an asset list, and this is really valuable, and we try to use this as much as possible. And when I say asset list, I'm talking sound effects, music, 3D models, textures, everything, particle textures, the whole lot. List them out, exactly what you need, as much as you can think of, and it's going to be huge. But what that will give you is the ability to then go to the people who are going to create those assets, so your sound designer for the sound effects or whatever, and you can say, okay, how long is it going to take you to make this ball-smashing sound effect for metal on metal? And the sound designer goes, 15 minutes. And you go, right, multiply that by 3, and that's how long it's going to take. And that way, you can then sum up how long your assets are going to be developed, and that's going to help a lot when you come to planning out how long your game's going to take and how long the time frame's going to be. And once you've kind of calculated all of that and you've spoken to the programmers and multiplied their time by 5, because they're just as unreliable, then you have a really good idea of how much time that's going to take you. And you can sort of sit back and go, well, hell, that's a 2-year project, and we only got 6 months. So you can make a call then as to, right in the planning phase, whether you've got enough time to take it on or not. we use a number of tools to help us do all this sort of thing. So one of the tools we use is Trello in Cloudflare, and that's been awesome to track sort of issues that you're going through and issues to come, and sort of categorizing them into feature sets and that sort of thing. With some of the other companies that I run, we use other tools like Fabricator. Unlike Trello, Fabricator is kind of a PHP-based self-hosted thing. I mean, you can pay for the hosting one, but who wants to do that when you can do it for free? And with another company, we use Redmine, which is Rails and PHP-based self-hosted system. Fabricator is much more around visual results. So you can do stuff like planning out visual layouts and that sort of thing, and getting multiple opinions on it throughout your team and that sort of thing, which is really quite cool. Redmine's much more of a plugin based. It'll do whatever you want it to do as long as you can find the plugin. But it's much more, I find it's much more code oriented. And then the other thing is Toggle, which helps you track all of your people's time. And that's really important as well, because Toggle allows you to create reports that show exactly where all the time's being spent. So if you can see that one of your artists is taking forever on one particular map, you know to go and talk to them. Right. This section here, meeting obligations, is often not covered all that much, but I think it's really important because people don't really consider it. Meeting professional obligations is stuff like meeting your deadlines and what are the consequences for not meeting those deadlines. So basically what I'm doing here is making you think about what you need to when you come to doing this stuff. I mean, there are lots of different consequences you can offer, like positives and negatives. I prefer to try and do the incentivized method with deadlines. So instead of going, hey, you're not going to get paid next week if you don't meet the deadline, try and find a positive consequence for it. And people tend to be a lot more responsive to that. Another way to help people meet deadlines is to task breakdown. So you have a huge big task, split it into as many little tasks as you can, and assign them to it. Now, and assign it to, but don't assign them all to them. Assign them to them as they go, and that way, as they complete them, the person completing them will feel much happier about working on stuff, because they'll be like, yeah, I've just completed this task, excellent, tick, next. Rather than working on the level and spending 3 weeks, 4 weeks on the level and getting bogged down in it, they may actually take another week to do it because they don't feel positive about what they're working on. We have a concept with one of the companies I work with called quick win tasks. And we take the smallest tasks and allot them to people at the very beginning of the day. And as the first 2 tasks you do, and they're like 15, 20-minute tasks. And those 2 tasks that you do, even if you're doing this yourself and you're allotting yourself your own tasks, give yourself 2 tasks that you can do really quickly. Because at the beginning of the day, when you go through those 2 tasks, you're like, yes, I've done 2 things. Right, next, where's the big thing? And you go on to a slightly bigger thing afterwards. And it gives you a much more positive outlook. Right, onto the personal side of the obligations. Making time available. Now, for people that have other jobs that they do as well, like this is not my full-time gig, this is my part-time gig, because I need to pay for power and food and all that sort of thing, and a wife. You need to make sure that you're setting aside a solid chunk of time every week that is regulated every week that you're doing games on. And you need to make sure you stick to it, because the moment you break away from that, the pattern's broken, and you'll just convince yourself that you can take another week off, and it doesn't work. You've got to make sure that it's really regulated. The other section that doesn't get covered all that much is managing relationships. And when I say relationships, I'm not talking your girlfriend and boyfriend, I'm actually just talking about the friendships between you. I'll give you a scenario. Second games company I ran with a guy, and right at the beginning, we had a conversation and we said, right, what happens if this game doesn't take off? And inevitably, it actually didn't. But because we'd had that conversation at the beginning, and the friend that I'd started it up with went, you know what, if it doesn't work, we'll just call it a day and we'll move on to something else. And because of that initial step, it was really easy when things didn't work to go, okay, we now both know what we're doing. You don't have that conversation and you get to the end of something and something's not going to work, people start to get really antsy and crappy because you haven't planned out what happens when everything starts falling apart. Not saying it will, just saying in case. So create a plan for the breakdown of a particular relationship. And this is actually especially important if you're jumping into something with a partner or spouse. And I know a couple of my friends who are starting up games companies with their wives and husbands, and that's a particular one to be careful of, because you need to make sure that you talk about it before you start. What's going to happen? If the relationship breaks down, what happens to the company? What happens to the rest of the people that are involved? Because it gets really horrible if one person is like the artist, and if that relationship breaks down, what's going to happen to that artist? You can't have a game without an artist. Well, depending on your game, of course. But it's and then plan for the reverse. So create a plan for the breakdown of the business, so that if you are married to the other person, or if you're best friends with the other person, what happens when the business breaks down? In the case of my first one, my best friend that I'd known for years and years and years lawyered up, and I haven't spoken to him since. So and we didn't plan any of this. Also create a plan for disagreements, because people are inherently going to not agree with you. It's nature. You're always going to think something slightly different to the other person at some point. So talk to people, work out what happens when you don't agree with things. Right, funding option. So you've sorted everything else out and you're like, well, I really want some money to do this. Of course, you do have the option of working at the same time, but some people want to, put some more effort into it and want to actually push forward some funding. There are several different options. I've previously gotten funding through the CDC, not to be confused with the Centre of Disease Control, but this is the Canterbury Development Corporation. I did have a search around to see whether there was a similar thing for Auckland and Wellington. I couldn't seem to find anything, but I'm sure there'll be similar trade and enterprise organisations out there. You'll be surprised how receptive they are to technology. Like those sort of, NZTNE is another one which I actually haven't noted down on there, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise. They are super receptive to technology people. So if you're developing a game that's using like a new technology or whatever, they want to hear from you. And they'll help you a lot of the way and push you towards any funding opportunities that are possibly there. You've got stuff like iwi and government grants, where if you're able to take advantage of those sorts of things, you can apply for them, and it's just a quick Google search before you find those sorts of things you can apply for. You've got a number of opportunities at business.gov.nz. They've got a list of all of the funding programs that you can apply for there as well. Then if you get really desperate, there's always family and friends. Go and hit up and don't be afraid to do this, go and hit up your friends that you know are a little bit loaded, and just say, hey, do you want an investment opportunity? And see what comes out of it. There's also crowdsourcing, but the reason I put this at the bottom is because this is increasingly becoming harder and harder to actually get any sort of money out of it without becoming a marketing guru. So I definitely would say try the top ones first. So there is a number of different drawbacks to having funding, which is never covered. Everyone's like, yes, apply for funding and get all this money and this would be great. One of them is your timed deliverables. Normally, they want a full plan of exactly what you're going to do and when you're going to do it, and they will hold you to that plan. My second the games company that I ran, Off Lake Studios, we had an investment by an angel investor. And they invested a small amount of money for us to complete an off-road racing game that was internet-based. And this was back in 2010, so sort of before Steam was sort of the way Steam is now. And our plan was to have this as the next Trackmania, but for off-road. We had an angel investor that was extremely picky on the timed deliverables thing. And when we got to the end of the project, we had it all finished off, apart from last few bugs in the server code. And I went and spoke to the angel investor, and I said, hey, look, need 4 weeks. And he's like, I'm not going to give you 4 weeks. And so I said, look, we'll take 4 weeks unpaid, just let us finish it. He's like, no, rip out the networking, make it single player. This is coming from someone who's never played a computer game in their life. And that was the death of the project. And it got released and nothing happened. So that highlights the loss of the control of the idea thing as well. They will make calls that you absolutely disagree with, and there's not really much you can do about it because they are the people supplying the money. And at the end of the day, they will stop supplying the money. And the hardest bit about all of this is that you actually have your IP tied up most of the time. So if you've got, well, in our case, we had this racing game. We couldn't even take that racing game after it failed and go, hey, look, let's add the networking in and re-release it, because the IP was tied with this other guy. And he was like, nah, it's been released, let it go. And you can't do anything about it. So it's another money or potential profit-driven decisions. So that was his short-sightedness, wanting to just get a quick buck straight away out of it. And it backfired on him. We knew it was going to happen, and we told him, but he didn't listen. So, yeah, final words. I mean, the business isn't easy. If you're going to make mistakes, but just make sure that all those mistakes aren't in key functional areas, and don't be afraid to ask people for advice, because people are friendly, generally. But, yeah, so any questions? Yeah, go for it.
You mentioned that your studios were your part-time job, and you mentioned that you worked somewhere else. How did you manage to control like your daily job, your studio, your family, your mental health?
That's a really good question. Currently, I run 3 different businesses and shareholders in another one. So that's really good question. I've set out, I said before that I set out to be really, really strict with your time. On Mondays, I'm working with contract work for web. I'm a web programmer, which, creative director, web programmer. I know it doesn't make sense. I just do a lot of things. So that's how I earn most of my money. On Tuesdays, I'm working on my other business, which is a SaaS app to manage staff, which is doing incredibly well at the moment. And then Wednesdays, I'm back on to contract web work, as well as Thursdays. And then on Fridays, I'm onto the business, and onto games. And Saturday, I'm onto games. And then Sunday, my wife complains at me for not making enough time for her during the week. So that's pretty much, yeah. It's hard to balance, but I make sure that those days are solidly set out, and I don't deviate from them. Because the moment you start deviating, it all breaks down. And I've had it happen before, and I don't like it. So, yeah.
How are you here?
Good question. I took the week off. But yeah, I can justify this being here because it's a game-related thing, and yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that. I was wondering if you could speak about, you started with the chat saying about your first contract and how to be both the best and the worst thing to happen.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little more about how you would actually get that first contract? Like, what are some recommendations?
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that one's a tricky one because with some cases people kind of fall into it, and that was the case with me. I kind of semi-engineered it. So I was coming out of Polytech, and I thought, what can I do as my end-of-year project that would get the most eyeballs? And I thought, let's go for something cultural. And I literally built a Maori pre-colonial village and allowed you to walk around it and interact with people and hear about all sorts of things. Really, it was a walking simulator at the time. But it was one of those things where I was like, what can I do that most people will sit up and go, I haven't seen much of this happening. And this was years and years ago. So, it was sort of, didn't really happen. And back then you had no support lines either as well. So you're just looking at what's around you and going, where's an opportunity? Aside from if you're not got an opportunity where you can and do a public exhibition of something, I guess going out and networking is the easiest way to do that. And you would be surprised how many people are looking for other people. And don't just limit yourself to going to game meetups. Go to other meetups because you never know where it comes in. I mean, I met one particular business contact at what they called it a high-tech launch program, but it was a business program to help you accelerate your business. And the guy he sold a ticket system and that ran in theatres around the world. And I sold him the idea on having like a virtual reality sit in the seat, see where you're seated in the theatre thing, which is close enough to being games. You know, it's using the same technology, so you can learn about the technology at the same time as making some money. And so that contract work actually ended up being my main source of income for the next 10 years. So it's funny how that all sorts of that works out. But yeah, networking is the biggest thing. Like, absolutely. Go and talk to as many people. And I know some, like I'm shocking for it. I suck at networking. But the biggest thing is force yourself to go and talk to as many different people as you can. Even if you just go up to them and ask them what they're doing, what they do, and you never know where an opportunity will come from. Yeah.
Who was that angel investor?
Someone who is no longer in New Zealand, but yeah. Okay, so interesting with that, that's an angel investor I found through CDC. So I literally went through organizations that grouped lots of people together, and that's why I'm saying NZTNE, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, they literally have hundreds of people looking to invest in ideas. And if you can convince someone that your idea is going to be the next best thing, that's the secret, you know, and that's what happened with that particular guy. And yeah, he saw that, you know, games were up and coming, and he was like, yep, okay, I'll dump some money into that and take the risk. Unfortunately for him, he was stupid enough to make some silly decisions, and it didn't pay off. But yeah, if he'd pushed through on it, I don't know, maybe I would be sitting with a studio of 100 people, who knows? But yeah, so, any other? Cool, oh well, thank you very much for your time. Thanks.